Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ben Masson, and I'll be your moderator for this afternoon. So, as I just said, my name is Ben. I'm the CEO of the SCE Group. And the SCE Group is in the cybersecurity business. We deal with identity and access and identity protection, verification, and fraud and risk intelligence, and digital identity, and audit and assurance, and all that good stuff. And so today, we're going to talk about cybersecurity. The title of this is Cybersecurity in the Age of Zoom. We're going to talk about everything that we need to know as individuals to be good stewards of the interwebs, to make sure that our digital lives are secure, we're protecting our data, other people's data, just generally following good practices. And we've assembled a pretty cool panel here, three very diverse individuals with different backgrounds. And what we're going to do is try to have some fun, educate you, and really have a good, productive discussion. And really kicking this thing off is our daily interactions move online. It's very important to ask ourselves what threats lurk behind this digital curtain of ours. Cybersecurity is something that deserves our attention. And how prepared are we to deal with this virtual landscape? What are the responsibilities that we have as individuals? What are our employers, our business associates? What are the responsibilities each and every one of us have between us and our interactions? And what's at stake if there's a compromise? So the panel is going to discuss some questions, and I'm going to do some intros in a moment. And just say just a few quick words, and then I'm going to hand to Mac and Michaela for a moment, but just to keep this in consideration. I did have a slide prepared, but I can't bring myself to show it for sort of a sad reason. You know, I usually use a presentation about my now beloved memory pet pig. We bought our girls a pet pot-bellied pig on Memorial Day, and I opened one of my presentations with a picture of Pinky, the pig. Pinky has a Wi-Fi enabled pig feeder, so even my pet pig needs to worry about having a digital footprint in this world. And if Pinky needs to care about it, we all need to. Unfortunately, Pinky passed away a few weeks ago from a birth defect, so moment of silence for Pinky. Okay, and so with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass over to Mac and Michaela to say a few words, and then they'll pass it back to me, and let's get this party going. So Michaela, Mac, the M&Ms, go for it.
Go ahead, Mac.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? Just want to make sure it's a rainy day up here. Okay.
Yep.
Hey guys, I'm Mac. I'm the event coordinator for KettleSpace. I've been working with Michaela from Hacker Paradise to put this together. So for those of you who don't know, KettleSpace is a New York City-based co-working company. So in days of pre-COVID past, we would take hospitality spaces, restaurants, and turn them into co-working spaces in their off hours. We're slowly reopening again, but in the meantime, we launched a digital platform for our members to connect. They get access to a huge list of discounts. There's a Slack channel, and get access to events like these. You'll all get a link to join. It's free to join. It's a really cool community. And yeah, I'm excited to dive into this topic with you. Michaela, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Really excited to see you here. It's a really interesting topic and one that I think is really relevant. A bit about Hacker Paradise. We're a program for serious professionals that essentially want to combine their love of travel with the opportunity to advance their careers. So our motto really is we work hard and we adventure far. And every month we call a different destination home. This is in pre-COVID times. So our participants can join us for a whole year or travel with us month to month. Our program includes high quality accommodations, access to co-working spaces, engaging local events and workshops, as well as 2 on-the-ground facilitators to manage any potential issues. So that means that our participants are able to focus on what matters, which is really just building their careers and traveling the world at the same time, as well as making some kick-ass friends. So that's a bit about us as the co-host along with KettleSpace. So we'll turn it back to Ben to get going. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
All right. Thank you. So now let's take and let our panelists do a brief introduction of themselves, and then we'll get moving. So Michelle, why don't you take a moment, please?
Sure. Hi. Thanks everyone for joining. My name is Michelle Anguiano, and I am a cybersecurity consultant based in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. So I have a bachelor's and master's degree in cybersecurity and information assurance. And I work mostly with a lot of small businesses, home offices based around the world to help make sure that they're secure. I have a big passion for policies, procedures, governance, risk, and compliance, and just protecting people in general.
Perfect. Sebastian?
Hi, everyone. So I have a master's in software engineering, and I've been doing that for 15 years. And I came to this topic of software, of security in general as a user, just because my work is on the road. I've been traveling full time for a little over 2 years now. I'm currently in Greece. And I've done a lot of trips with the Hacker Paradise as well, which is how I came to here. And also throughout my trips, I've always tried to make my fellow travelers as aware as possible about the threats they're facing and how to mitigate those risks they're taking, especially as like travelers and full-time travelers and nomads. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
Perfect. And Mr. Zach?
Thank you, Ben, and thank you all for coming today. I'm Zach Zager, and I'm a product manager at Onapsis, which is a Boston-based cybersecurity company specializing in SAP, Oracle EBS, and other SaaS product security. I've been at Onapsis for about 2.5 years now, and before that, I was a student at Tufts University studying innovation and management and engineering psychology.
Perfect. All right. Now I'm just going to give a few little ground rules, keep it light, and we're going to get right into this sucker. So first and foremost, this is the third event in the Future of Work series. So Mac or Michaela, is there anything you want to talk a little bit, anything further on the future of work or any other future events, or keep going?
No, I think let's go for it.
Okay, great. So we're going to do some questions. We're going to post questions in the chat and QA at the end. And we're going to do some flash questions. So let's do a flash question right now. Let's do a simple one. By a show of hands, who's using Windows and who is using a Mac-based device? Let's try this out. Aha. The answer is, I can't wait. Bated breath. On whoever's holding this up. Oh, wow, I'm shocked Windows got 33%. Excellent. All right. I'm using Windows, yes, in full disclosure. All right, so that's we're gonna do some Q&A, we'll do some flash questions. And some basic ground rules, let's keep ourselves on mute. You can unmute to ask questions at the end. And make sure you're going in speaker view so you can see who's speaking and keep it clean. And with that, let's go. So we talked a little bit in the introduction. You heard the term the digital lifestyle or digital nomad. So that's going to be our first area of discussion. So we talked about the digital nomad lifestyle. And the digital nomad lifestyle, I think, is something pretty damn slick and interesting. These are people that really are truly living the life that we're trying to secure. Let's talk a little bit about, I'll start with you, Sebastian. Can you talk a little bit about some of the risks associated with the lifestyle and things that you've learned along the way that might not be so common sense, or in things that are stupidly common sense that we also may not have even realized? Anything you can say around that?
Yeah. So as a digital nomad, there are two things that are pretty unusual compared to like when you just have a 9-to-5 job in a traditional setup, I would say. The first thing is that everything is in your gear, the gear you have with you, your laptop, your smartphone, your tablet, whatever you have with you, and that's it. And sometimes you're in locations where you don't have easy access to replacements or anything, so you don't have like a big file server in your apartment or some external hard drive where you can back up stuff and stuff like that. So everything needs to be mobile and as light as possible. And the other thing also is that your context changes all the time. So you work from cafes, you work from airports, hotels, and sometimes the connection is poor and sometimes it's unsafe. And like, you have to take that into account for everything. So the risks that you take in those circumstances are loss, break, or theft, basically. Those are the three main risks. If you lose your stuff, if you lose your gear, that affects your livelihood directly, because digital nomad means that your job is entirely online, and if you don't have a laptop anymore, if you lose your smartphone, then you lose at least part of your ability to work. And that's one big element. You need to be able to get back on your feet as soon as possible. The second aspect is like break. So if you break your gear, you break your laptop, that's also, again, something that prevents you from working. And the last one is theft. So if you lose it and somebody else gets a hold of it, or if you just get your laptop stolen, which can happen very easily in certain locations, you need to be sure that the sensitive information that your customers or your business partners gave you access to is not accessed by other people, and that they cannot, I don't know, steal your money or blackmail anyone or stuff like that. So those are the main threats and the main risks. And it's important to always remember that the more you travel, and the more likely it gets that this will happen to you. It does not just happen to others, and that's why everybody has to be responsible and like take some simple measures. It's it's very similar to health insurance, for example. You wouldn't think of traveling without a proper health insurance in place in case something happens to you personally. I think it's the same for your gear and for your software, for your data. You need to take some simple measures. It's not very expensive, and it's always worth it. And again, it's something that we don't think about because we think, yeah, maybe I'll take some measures later on. But then it's when something bad happens that you realize how you didn't anticipate enough, and you didn't invest just a little bit to make sure that everything was safe. So yeah, those are the main things, I'd say, the main aspects of digital nomad lifestyle that impact security.
Okay, cool. Zach, I want you to counter that a little bit. Because Michelle has lived the digital nomadic lifestyle. Zach, you're a little bit different in that you know, you're working for more of in a brick and mortar type organization. What are your thoughts on the digital lifestyle as it pertains to you? Living in New York City, working for a more traditional startup type company, an established company and whatnot. How does that pertain to your world?
So I think, especially in the time of COVID, of remote work, I've definitely started to see what the sort of digital nomad lifestyle is like. Whereas, like you were saying, prior to this March, I would go into work every day. My laptop would be there. I'd work from home once or twice a week, but primarily it was work happened in an office, and where there was going to be guaranteed internet. If I had a technical problem, IT was there to help. But as of this year, that's shifted a bit. And so I think a lot of people are kind of living in this halfway lifestyle where it's not quite digital nomad, but you don't have the assurances of working in an office. So you still have other security concerns to worry about, such as what if you have kids or a roommate and they accidentally spill something on your laptop because you're working in the kitchen? This seems a bit silly, but it definitely happens more than you'd expect. What happens if you have roommates and they notice that your work laptop is open and they see some sensitive data that you have from work? You always have to be sure that you're doing things like locking your laptop and keeping data away from those who you might not even think have any reason to see it. Another point to bring up is around use of a work device for non-work purposes. Whether you're just streaming movies or doing all of your online shopping on your work laptop, you don't know what your employer is actually able to see, could be everything. And you don't want to accidentally download some file when you were trying to find a movie online that you couldn't find on Netflix, that ends up corrupting your computer and locking you out or getting access to a company system. So I definitely see a lot of people might be even more interested in a digital nomad lifestyle now that they've tasted this kind of halfway in between year. And even for myself now, I'm full-time remote. Onapsis is based in Boston, and I am now based in New York. So in a sense, I could any day go off and just travel around South America with my laptop and live the full lifestyle. So I definitely expect in the next few years, we'll see more people living like that, especially once international travel starts to pick back up.
Well, thank you. Michelle, since you've been in the trenches of the digital nomad lifestyle and the digital lifestyle as well, can you talk a little bit about some of the fail-safes and fallbacks and things that you do to just make sure that, first and foremost, you're constantly aware of your surroundings and aware of the concerns and things that might be impacting what you're doing and how you mitigate?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I lived the digital nomad lifestyle for about 2 years, traveling the world, and I've been, I've planted roots since then. But the things that you do, the mitigation factors, are actually very similar for both, whether you're traveling internationally or you're working at home or working in an office. So a big thing which both Sebastian and Zach touched on is physical security. We like to think of cybersecurity as just tech-based. It's only the things happening in your devices, but it's not. A huge component of it is the physical security of your devices. Where is your laptop? Where is your phone? What happens if someone steals your phone? Are we just worried about the fact that you've lost $1,000 phone, or are we worried about, did you have company data on that phone? Did you have all of your passwords written in plain text in a note on your phone? Was your phone easily able to get into? So some of the fail safes for things like that are really simple, but they're things that often get overlooked. Do you have a lock on your phone? Is it a fingerprint lock or a Face ID lock? Those are going to be more secure than using a touchpad lock, because with a number lock, if I'm sitting behind you in a restaurant, chances are I'm going to see you pick your phone up and type that number lock in quite a few times. It doesn't take me very long to pick up on what that is. And once I pick your phone up, now I'm in your phone. And what else do I have access to now? And things like that can be really scary. I've had clients who had phones unlocked that were taken, and then someone got into their banking apps and were able to drain money from their bank accounts into completely different bank accounts. It happens. I've seen it happen. So even simple things like that, getting a phone lock that is biometric based, fingerprint or Face ID if you can, and having the same on your apps on your phone. Use those multi-factor authentication, we call them, as often as you can, because they are your backups and your fail-safes. Making sure you're backing up your computers and your phones so that if something does happen, if it breaks, someone spills something on it, someone takes it, you just knock it off a counter, you don't have to worry about, now where is that data? How do I get it back? What have I lost for the company? You have easy backups in place. And then a lot of it has to do with really simple things like passwords. For different accounts you have. Is it a password that's easily guessed? If you're using just letters, no numbers, you can hack a password in less than 2 minutes. It's that simple. You can just plug it into a computer program. So are you making complex passwords? Are your passwords different for every account that you have? Because if I guess one password, how easily can I guess all the rest? Probably pretty easily. And then taking things like email awareness. Are you just clicking on links and emails indiscriminately, or are you checking to make sure that link is actually taking you to where you think it's supposed to go? Because it's really easy to make a link that looks like it's going to your bank that isn't. And then when you type in your username and password, now I have your username and password to your bank. I can go in and take what I want. So these things sound simple, but the simple things are what often gets overlooked when it comes to security.
Ain't that the truth? Cool. Want to close this out with something back to the Sebastian, to you. You mentioned the digital checklist. We've talked a little bit about that. Can you just give a brief overview on this concept of the digital checklist and what people should be thinking about from
Yeah,
there?
sure. So it's just a set of measures and like simple, very practical pieces of advice, including links to tools and systems that you can put in place to just basically cover everything that Michelle just talked about. So for example, for your password and for your authentication in general, my first piece of advice is always take care of your email accounts. That's your first line of defense. Not just because somebody who has access to your mail inbox can also see all your data and all the emails that you've exchanged, but also because they can use this email to as a platform basically to access other things, and including, don't never forget that, forgot password. So whenever you are connecting your email account with, I don't know, Netflix or your bank account or whatever, there's generally a forgot password procedure, and that goes through to your email. So somebody who has access to your email can reset the password on any of your accounts, and then you're screwed. So your first line of defense is your email. And for that, two-factor authentication is a must. So it's easily accessible on Gmail or on like Google Mails or any Outlook or whatever. And in general, I advise people also not to use phone number, like a short text two-factor authentication, because this is easily hackable. There's, especially if you're American, the cell providers are not very careful with the identity verification. And there's this process called SIM swapping, which is makes it very easy to basically steal your phone number and access your and receive your messages for two-factor authentication. So please use something like Google Authenticator, which is an app that you install on your phone and generates random codes, and you can use that as a second factor. And then like be super careful about your passwords. And then in general, like Michelle mentioned, one thing I always advise again is to use a password manager. Yes, generating complex passwords for different passwords for all your accounts is not going to be very feasible in the long run. You probably have hundreds of those accounts, and that's where password manager comes in. It is safe. It's their entire business to make it safe and to cipher everything properly and everything. So things like LastPass or Cleverlane or 1Password is the one I use personally. You can store a lot of secure information in there, including all your passwords, your bank account information, your credit cards and whatnot. And it's super powerful and super useful. So that's the first thing. The second thing is backups. And then, yeah, again, remote backups. You don't have access to, you don't have your time capsule at home. So there are things like Backblaze, for example, that make it really easy to set up a remote backup. And again, the checklist has all the links to those things. And the third thing is your internet connection. And that's your basically your third line of defense whenever you're using like some public Wi-Fi in a cafe, in a Starbucks, in a hotel, even in some co-working spaces. In some countries, it can be very shady. So use something like a VPN. It's really key. And don't use a free one, because free ones are not powerful enough, and you will pay a big penalty in terms of bandwidth, and you will think that VPNs are crap and it's too slow. Yeah, it's too slow if you use a free one. So the commercial ones are a few tens of dollars a year at most, and really makes a big difference in terms of performance. And it's a big insurance, and also it has some added benefits, not just for security, but when you're traveling the world, if you want to access your Netflix catalog from another country, you're a fan of anime and you want to see the catalog from South Korea, you can easily do that with a VPN. So there's a lot of benefits there as well. So yeah, those are the main things: your passwords and your email, your backups, and your VPN.
All right, great. Excellent. So I'm going to close that out. We're going to move on to the next section here, because I think that we talked a little bit about elements of this, and now let's move really into the area of privacy, personally identifiable information, and governance and compliance and all that jazz. So, so I'm going to start with Michelle here. Michelle, Let's just start with a high level question. In fact, let's do a flash question because we haven't done one in a minute. Let's go. iOS versus Android. Hit it.
iOS.
No, we're going to do a flash question. Mac's going to put the question up.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. There we go. Okay. Cool. So
Okay.
I'm going to ask you a very high level, broad question, an overly simplistic question. Michelle, how concerned are you about what they have on you? When we think about big data, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, or any of the big media, big data worlds, how concerned are you about what they have on you?
Very is the short answer. But I would also caveat that with but there's a lot that everyone knows about you when it comes to data. You know, you could cut yourself off. You could never have Facebook. You could never use social media. You could never do any of those things that you associate with this is how they get my information. But companies will still have data on you. They have data based on your friends that have Facebook or your family members that use social media or Instagram. If you've been tagged in a photo, if you've been tagged in a location, those types of things all gather data about you. So I am worried about how much is out there, but I also know that it's one of those battles where you have to do all you can to keep yourself safe, but you're never going to make it so that your data isn't out in the nether, in the intranet space.
Cool. Zach, working for a company that secures ERP and things like that, and just call them portals that are chock full of personally identifiable information. How concerned are your customers? Do they understand the ramifications of what they're holding on to, what they have, and how they're protecting it? How concerned are they? What are they doing about it?
I would say our customers are extremely concerned about attackers getting access, or even just people within the organization who shouldn't have access, getting access to their critical applications. These systems that hold HR data, payroll data, some of the most valuable information that a company has. Say an attacker was able to get in to one of these systems and say, oh, that's cute, you're sending out $500 million worth of paychecks this year. How about those go to my account? And then next thing they know, they've sent millions of dollars to an attacker's account without that person noticing. So that's why they rely on solutions like Onapsis and like other wide variety of security solutions to make sure that all different layers of their systems, whether it's the hardware, whether it's the network, whether it's the application layer, are secured. And we see that every day with our customers. They want to know that from our product, they're getting only the most critical information, because like any kind of success rate tool where you're measuring incidents by criticality, they want to know that they're not getting an incident every single time anyone logs into the system. They only want to get it when a potentially suspicious activity occurs. So we work with our customers quite a bit on keeping that balance right and making sure the positive, false positive, and true negative rates are where they should be. And I would also add that especially from my perspective, where I'm in charge of our initiative to collect data from our customer systems to better understand how they're using the product and improve our product based on that performance data. It's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, we are ensuring that our customers' systems are up and running. Let's say if one of their sensors goes down, they're gonna not be able to collect information. And if someone was able to get into their system, take down one of our sensors, and then access the critical system, they would only be able to detect that once the sensor is up. So we work with our customers to ensure that they're compliant with all the right regulations by having real-time performance analytics. But the other side of that is that data being collected from our system is also some data leaving the customer's network. So we work with them to ensure that it's a very specific data points that are collected and that all data is anonymized and not connected to any specific individuals, which might tie us into the a conversation about GDPR and other kind of global privacy and security regulations.
Cool. Sebastian, question for you. In the US, we're very concerned about GDPR. GDPR is still a major four-letter word here in the US that many of my customers are talking about and worried about. In the EU, being in Greece right now, being mostly in Europe, are they just as concerned about the individual US regulations like California's CCPA or DFS in New York and so forth? Is it reflexive?
Not as much, and I would say there's a lot of it's a weird attitude that a lot of companies have with GDPR in EU. I would say a lot of them think they understand it, but very few actually do.
Yeah, I don't think anybody truly understands it.
I've had, and it's not that hard. You really need to, like, the regulation is pretty well written and pretty consistent, I would say. It's, for me, it's still too late and even too little in certain areas, but it's there and it's pretty clear when you read it. But the thing is, there's been so much misinformation and miscommunication around it that, and everybody waited for the last minute also to implement those. So, right now, like one of my clients, for example, has had this badge on their website saying we're GDPR compliant. What does that mean? Like, do you actually have followed all the procedures, or is it just you think you're in the right? And to be honest, I'm developing apps for them, and I don't have a list of all the data that I'm collecting and what it's there for, and who is responsible for their collection, and what are all the partners that have parts of that data, which is normally necessary for properly implementing GDPR. So yeah, there's a lot of misunderstandings around that. I think it's absolutely necessary, and I hope that at some point the US are going to have something at least on par with it to make it just more consistent, because now it's just unfair in a sense, because some companies can just say, okay, I'm going to stay in the US, I'm going to move the data over there, and the problem is solved. And then some US companies have actually just cut access to their services entirely because it was just too complicated for them to be GDPR compliant. I would say in general, a lot of companies based in the EU are targeted at EU customers anyway. So it's kind of whereas the US companies target the whole world. So it's a different problem space. And but there's a lot of misunderstanding around it, and it's going to take a while for everybody to figure it out and to understand what they can and cannot do. For example, I'm a consultant myself. I work freelance for companies. I get a lot of messages from recruiters and body shoppers and stuff like that, and most of what they do is completely illegal under GDPR, and they still keep doing it because that's just their business model. They haven't found a way to work around it. So, and there's a lot of practices like that need to be like taken into account. And of course, all the enforcement around GDPR is still pretty soft because we're still early in the implementation. But my hope is that over the years, it will strengthen and be more consistent. Right now, unfortunately, it affects mostly small companies. The big companies have armies of lawyers, and they can always, find loopholes and work around stuff. And the companies for which it takes the most work and make it work.
Just take a minute to protect, know what it is. In the interest of time right now, I'm going to say, please click on that link. It is worth everybody at least reading and understanding the basics. So again, thank you to Zach. So now, in terms of, to Michelle, data on loan is a concept that I use. We talk about data. We can talk about data in rest when it's being stored, data in motion when it's being accessed, data in use when you're using it. But data on loan, can you talk a little bit about concerns about handling customer data, data that you need to make sure that you're obviously protecting because for the exposure, and also are most about organizations, are they concerned about their business associates and how they handle data?
Sure. Yeah. So business on loan, for anyone who doesn't know, is basically any data that is coming from the business to you that you have for a set period of time and then you give back to them. So customer data, it could be business secrets, just company information in general. And it's your job to protect it. Now, there's two sides of that. There's a part where the company needs to protect, and there's a part where you need to protect. But there is definitely a big concern with making sure people are taking the right precautions to protect this data on loan that they have. And we've talked about a few of the things already that you can do to help protect that data. You know, using password managers to help protect the different passwords, login, authentication attempts that you make to access this data. Using encryption is really important. If you have this data on your computer, whether it's a work computer or a personal computer, you need to be making sure you're encrypting things so that if someone gets into your computer, they can't easily just open a file and gain access to, say, a list of people's social security numbers that you might have been given by your company, or a list of people's addresses and phone numbers and all sorts of things like that. You want to make sure that you're using a VPN when you have any public Wi-Fi connection, or you're using data on your phone if you don't have access to a VPN connection. Things that you can do to make sure that you are just taking the minimum fail-safes, basically, to protect that data that is really being entrusted to you. And in terms of are businesses worried? Absolutely. Businesses are very worried. The grand majority of breaches that happen usually happen from really silly little things, like somebody left their laptop in their car and somebody stole the laptop. I used to work for a company that had a major data breach. We had hundreds of thousands of employee information get lost because a contractor left their laptop in their car. It was that simple. And it was unlocked, an unlocked car and an unlocked laptop. So you didn't even need to use a password to get into the laptop to access all that information. Which really brings us back to what I was talking about before and what Sebastian and Zach have touched on as well. You know, physical security is really important, and making sure we're taking those bare minimum precautions to protect data that we're entrusted with.
Thank you. So this is now going to segue into the third piece, the third unit here, and then we'll go into our QA section. So as we're talking about data, obviously, I think everybody said more or less talked about at least the concept of basic protection. That's what we're pretty much talking about here today. So if we're talking about basic protection, I'm going to go through we're going to do quick hits here on basic protections first, because I want to make sure we cover a good amount of ground here with the time that we have left. So first and foremost, let's talk about a controversial topic, at least in my world, about whether it actually works or not: antivirus. Let's start with Zach, because I feel bad because Zach Zager is usually picked last in alphabetical order. Let Zach go first. What does antivirus mean to you? Is it effective? Is it not effective? Is there a better alternative? Let's talk about AV. Go for it.
So when I was younger, I always thought of antivirus as a very important thing to have on my computer, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s, when everyone was running Windows 98 or XP and nothing was secure. So I always remember having antivirus software on our computers because the internet was a lot more of a wild place. Sites didn't have HTTPS SSL authentication as often, so you didn't know who to trust as much. And then when I first got a Mac, I remember hearing that you really don't get viruses on a Mac. And I think as as I got older, I started to understand what was safe on the internet software as often. And I also think what's interesting is that as we have shifted to a more cloud-based infrastructure where most of the apps, most of what people use their computers for every day are for cloud services, are for their browser-based email, browser-based work applications, games, messaging services, and so on. I think we see viruses as less of a threat to computers, but what I think has continued to be a threat is phishing scams, which have only continued and only become more and more sophisticated. And we see them on our phones now. So I don't have so much explicitly to say about antivirus software, but I think as we've seen the threat landscape across our many devices shift now and shift over to being more about sending the right email, getting the right scam in, telling someone that if you send them money online, they'll get back 10x that. It's just a different threat landscape now, and it's almost as if rather than a more technical threat, it's a much more socially based threat to all of our devices and our data integrity.
Okay. Thank you. Cool. Michelle, let's one focus on quick hits here. Quick thoughts on antivirus?
Yeah, I probably have an opposite view. I actually use a lot of antiviruses, but it's because antivirus programs look at a very small portion of things. So if you're just going to use one antivirus and think I'm 100% protected because I'm using this one antivirus, the virus signatures, the signatures are what antiviruses is looking at to make sure that your computer doesn't have a virus in it. Those signatures change every day, every hour, sometimes every minute. So you kind of need a lot of protections. In cybersecurity, we call it defense in depth. So making sure you have tons of different things that are protecting you. So do I like antivirus? Sure, it's another defense in depth mechanism. But should you assume if you use an antivirus, your computer's safe? No, because it's just one portion of lots of different measures that are used to protect you.
Cool. Seb?
Yeah, there's one thing that keeps coming back, I noticed, and I think it's important to remember that there's basically, it's like a saying in the cybersecurity world, which is that absolute security is impossible. You cannot make something 100% safe. All you're trying to do is to make it uninteresting for the attacker. You're trying to make it either too expensive or too complex for them to do. And in the end, the biggest percentage of that remaining thing where it's easier to attack is through you. It's between the keyboard and the chair. So social engineering is probably the biggest attack vector for a lot of attacks. And that takes a lot of awareness and vigilance for us to be aware of that. Just a very concrete example, just before this meeting, I received an email apparently from a company based in France who deals with crypto wallets. So this company deals with crypto on a daily basis. They sell crypto products. They know everything about cybersecurity, but a few weeks ago, they got their email database broken into, and because of that, they've been the target of a phishing attack. And the phishing attack is pretty sophisticated. Like, the whole message is really scary because my crypto funds are going to disappear, are going to be stolen and everything. And when I click the link, it looks like it's going to the domain of the company. And it's HTTPS too, so it looks legit. Except when you look very closely at the URL bar, the address bar in the browser, you notice that the E in the domain, the letter E in the domain has a little dot under it. So they managed to, except that it's a, I don't know, E, but it's not an E. And if I hadn't noticed that, I would probably click the link and just installed a worm, because that's what they do. They just install something that then can listen to your keystrokes on your keyboard and steal your passwords and stuff like that. So you can have the best antivirus software. You can have the best measures in place. You can have two-factor authentication in place if you're not vigilant and if you trust basically where you're going and where you're typing your password and everything, you still can get your information stolen. So be aware of that. Be aware of when you get a phone call from somebody pretending to be from your bank or from somebody who wants to have some private information about your phone number and stuff like that. Be very careful, be very doubtful, ask for credentials verification, the same as they do to you when you want to, I don't know, change your account or transfer your phone number to another SIM card, same thing. Be careful with them, ask them for authentication, and be super careful with that. And remember that, yeah, your bank is never gonna call you to ask you for your PIN code and stuff.
I'm going to have time to get our questions in because we literally have 10 minutes left. So real quick hit. Sebastian, you will go in reverse order now. Multi-factor authentication, what does it mean to you and what do you recommend? And go. Stopwatch is running.
Yeah, no text two-factor authentication. Use Google Authenticator or any other app like that. It's safer. It's you don't need to be connected to the internet to use it. I mean, on your phone and stuff like that. If you're traveling and you need to swap your SIM card with a local one, you don't have any issue with that. So yeah, Google Authenticator is probably the best compromise between ease of use and safety. And then you can go all the way to dedicated crypto keys and stuff like that. But I would say, yeah, Google Authenticator is the good compromise.
Perfect. All right, Michelle, hit it.
Yeah, I would agree with Sebastian. Multi-factor authentication is huge. Don't use your phone. Don't use a number, a string of numbers. Using biometrics if you can. When it comes to authentication apps, definitely use those if it's an option. And if you have the option to use a one-time key, some businesses, like a lot of banking institutions, will give you a physical key that has a number that changes every 30 seconds. That is the most secure way, because there's no way that if somebody steals your phone that they have access to the key unless you taped it to your phone, which you shouldn't. So check with your banking institutions to see if that's an option and get it if you can.
Cool. And Zach, hit it.
Nothing really to add on multi-factor authentication. It's great, makes you much more secure. Use Google Authenticator, another authentication app. But the one thing I will add is around just general online hygiene. You know, every few months or a year or so, it's good to check, do I have any accounts that I don't use on any websites? And if that's the case, then the safest thing to do is just delete them. You can always recreate the account, and that's just another potential way for someone to get into your systems to get rid of.
Zach, that's a tremendous point. That's a tremendous point, is if you delete, if when in doubt, throw it out. If you don't need it, get rid of it, lower that exposure. That's a huge point. All right, let's talk about public Wi-Fi. And same thing, timer's going, and now we'll go back in reverse. Zach, hit it.
I'd avoid using public Wi-Fi when possible. If you are using it, doesn't hurt to use a VPN. You're much safer that way. Also, we were talking about VPNs before and not to use free ones. This is just a general principle for tools used online. If it's free, you are the product. So if you're using a free VPN, your data is probably being harvested and sold. And that's very insecure and bad for your privacy.
Cool. All right, Michelle.
Yep, huge fan of VPNs. My suggestion to people is, if there is anything that you look at on your phone or your computer that you would not want somebody else to gain access to, if you're connected to if you
justifiers, and I'm thinking of Starbucks here, who actually make it hard to use a VPN. At least make it hard to use the easy option for VPNs, which is just to run their VPN application and do that. So when that happens, it's better to avoid using the Wi-Fi altogether, because again, the risk is that any communication, any interaction you have on the internet, which is not ciphered, which does not use HTTPS or stuff like that, is easy to eavesdrop on and to just look at the data and whatever you're exchanging. So yeah, there's a huge risk there.
All right. Last question. This is everybody to make their closing statement. I'm going to say it's 2 parts and answer in 1 minute or less. What's at stake and what's the worst case scenario? Seb, hit it, reverse order.
I mean, the worst scenario I've seen with my own eyes is somebody who got hacked into their email account. From their email account, they got access to her bank account. They drained the money. They exchanged the password. The person was ended in Thailand without access to their bank account, to her email. She couldn't work anymore. She lost all her data. And in the end, her computer had become unusable because like too many pop-ups and everything. So this can go real bad, real fast. And yeah, just be careful. There are some simple measures to put in place. It's not that expensive.
Michelle?
What's at risk? Everything. Worst case scenario, honestly, depends on each person. I've seen exactly what Sebastian just said. Somebody who had all of their money taken out of their checking and savings account, and they had all of their credit cards maxed out because of a hacker. I've seen somebody who had their complete identity stolen, and somebody else who was opening credit cards and taking out all sorts of loans under their names. I've seen it where somebody had their entire client database stolen from them. So they had clients one day and they had no clients the next day because someone used redirection to steal all of their business. So it really depends on what is most important for you and what is the biggest worry for you. Is it losing your money? Is it losing your identity? Is it losing your ability to communicate with others or your business? So worst case is huge. It's expansive.
All right, and Zach, and then we'll go to questions. Go for it.
So what's at stake in terms of security is really your future, because if someone gets access to an account, not only could they impact you now, but they could continue to impact you. I've heard cases of someone installing a bot that gives them the new password when someone changes the password on an account. So they'll always have access to that account, and the only option would be for them to close the account. But I also think, to put a more positive spin on this, that security, if done proactively, can be simple and it can be very effective. It's very effective, and it can be a fun, nice way to bring your family together. Parents, talk to your kids about security. Kids, talk to your parents about security. And parents, talk to your parents about security, because they're attacks that target people of all ages in different ways that are highly specialized. And there are tons of resources out there that you can use that are like Sebastian going through his security checklist. There are tons of tools out there you can use to just go through, make sure accounts are secured, make sure accounts are safe, and that your money and your identity will not be taken down by hackers. You don't want to be the low-hanging fruit.
No, you don't. All right, let's go to some questions, and then we'll close this thing out. We'll probably spill a little bit over. As long as everybody's good, I can go a couple extra minutes. I got one personal question from Alistair, who asked about biometrics. What does everybody think about biometrics and sharing biometric information? Somebody just blurt out an answer. But again, quick hit.
Don't be afraid of like sending your biometric information, because usually it's not sent. When you use Face ID or Touch ID on your phone, it stays in your phone. It's not sent. Your fingerprints are not sent to some server or anything. It's very easy to check, actually. So you can be pretty trustful about that. Most OSs, Android, iOS, are very safe with that. So don't be scared. And biometrics and biometric authentication in the years to come, because there's a new standard for that now, WebAuth. So you will see that happen on a lot of websites who will replace passwords with biometric authentication.
All right, cool. All right. We did get a couple questions around blockchain. Something tells me we don't have enough time to answer questions around blockchain. The question is, how about blockchain and central servers? Is blockchain better than centralized servers? Can anybody answer that in 30 seconds or less? If not, we'll move on.
I just happen to give a lot of courses online about blockchain and stuff. So blockchain is promising, but for the future, it's not there yet, and it's not usable by everybody. So the idea behind it is to decentralize data and to make sure that you don't have to provide data that's useless to the services you're using, and not just store data just in case. But it's not there yet. So it's something interesting for the future, but yeah, for now, we just have to deal with what we have.
Okay, great. Next question, if we can get this in quick. Somebody asked about, quick hit answer, one word answer, Surfshark or Nord for the VPN, Nordtel.
Can't give it a one word, but VPNs, if you're paying for internet access, Nord, Express, Proton, they're all doing the same thing. Just make sure you're paying. Never go for a free VPN.
I'd say whichever one
all right.
you get the best discount on is what you should go with.
Okay. All right. Another quick couple word answers. Chromebooks, secure, not? Do we trust them, not?
All laptops are unsecure. It's what you do to secure them. So the idea that Mac can't get a virus is false. Macs can get a virus. I've taken care of plenty of Macs with viruses. Just like a PC and it's like a Chromebook. So it's what you do on top of it to protect it.
Other ways to strengthen, or actually, let me ask another question. We talked about VPN, I think, enough here. How safe is Zoom without end-to-end encryption? Anybody have any thoughts on Zoom or GoToMeeting or WebEx and these services without end-to-end encryption?
It's always the same trade-off between ease of use and security. And unfortunately, Zoom bet hard on ease of use more than security for a long time. They kind of corrected the course now, and they added a lot of security measures, including end-to-end encryption, that makes more sense. But yeah, it's always this kind of trade-off. And if something is too easy to use, you have to be careful about security.
Okay. All right. So that answers, I think, most of the questions. The last question is that we had that I saw, Apple iCloud keychain. Yes, no, thoughts?
I personally don't use it. I've seen it get broken into more than enough times that I trust manager, because if you're using then do you want this? But again, it's the measures you take on top of things to make it secure. You can make keychains secure, definitely. But like Sebastian said, there's that duality, the security versus the practicality. Do you want it to be easier to use, or do you want it to be more secure? And a lot of people tend to choose easier to use.
Excellent. On that note, I'm going to thank our panelists for a very lively discussion. I'm going to thank Mac and Michaela for putting this all together. And most importantly, I'm going to thank the audience for making this awesome. Thank you all very much. Hope everybody got something out of this, and looking forward to seeing you on the next one.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Cheers and have a great day.